This is the decade that rewired electric guitar tone forever. In this video, I'm gonna break down 4 essential tones of the 60s recreated using modern tools. You'll learn about the historical significance behind these sounds, as well as how to dial them in from scratch like a pro. Grab your guitar, plug in, and let's tone time travel. Before the 60s, guitar tone was about purity. With the exception of some sonic explorers like Les Paul, many players focused on dialing in the most faithful reproduction of the guitar sound as possible. The role of the amplifier was simply to amplify, to make it louder. In fact, the natural breakup that comes from pushing a clean tube amp to its limits was to be avoided at all costs. Of course, guitarists weren't always successful in this, pushing their amps to the edge of breakup, where clipping began to sneak its way into popular music throughout the 50s, with Chuck Berry and Elvis's guitarist Scotty Moore. The 50s also laid the foundation for affecting the guitar sound, with reverb, tape echo, and tremolo appearing as bonus features on combo guitar amplifiers. Things that had been co-opted from other recording technologies, mainly for vocalists. All of this changes at the turn of the decade when surf rock, the British Invasion, psychedelia, and garage rock take center stage. Today, I've dialed in 4 iconic sounds from the era using my own rig, and you can too. No rare or vintage gear required. Just basic guitar modeling software or a practice amp will do. We begin our journey in the early 60s. The guitar, once a promising sonic superweapon of rebellion, begins to fade.
Not so fast!
Instrumental groups and guitarists like the Shadows, Ventures, and Dick Dale keep the genre on life support, inspiring a wave of guitar slingers later in the decade. These players rely on the clean, glassy tones of amps like the Fender Vibrolux, Bassman, and Twin Reverb. Equipped with single coil or soap bar pickups, these snappy, chimey guitar sounds will define the pre-psychedelic era, from Miserlou to Meet the Beatles. Any low-gain tube amp or Fender clone will work. While there were plenty of tube amps available at the time, you can't go wrong with the character of a Fender Bassman or Twin Reverb for authentic 60s cleans. For the EQ sections, the treble and mid-range should be greater than the bass. Cranking the channel volume will get you closer to that edge of breakup sound, while cranking the master with the channel volume low will give you a cleaner tone. For a finishing touch, dial in a bit of spring reverb for a quick slapback echo effect. Spring reverb literally uses taut metal springs inside of the amp to create a simulated reverb effect by converting the audio signal into a mechanical vibration, which is then converted into an electrical signal and mixed back in with the dry guitar sound. The sparkling top end of the Fender amp with the single coil pickups gives you the much sought after sparkling punch of the era. Recording equipment in the 60s actually tended to sound quite dark. And with AM radio stations broadcasting between a narrow frequency range of, say, 40 Hz to 5,000 kHz, treble became a sought after novelty. And this drove a new generation of young guitarists glued to transistor radios to become treble chasers. Which brings us to tone number 2. So this might be the most dated of the 4 tones, but it's historically remarkable. And quick disclaimer, this section kind of covers 2 sounds that are used to the same effect. One is the crunchy, bombastic sound of a mutilated speaker cone producing clipping. with 2 being the jagged fuzzy honk of early fuzz stomp boxes like the Tone Bender and Gibson Maestro. These tones are quintessentially 60s. Extremely unrefined, brittle at times, but all attitude, and a hugely important stepping stone in the evolution of guitar sounds. So distortion's roots actually go much deeper than people realize. As early as the mid-50s, guitarists like Link Wray had begun to intentionally overdrive their clean tube amps to produce distortion effects, even poking holes in the speaker cones with pencils to produce additional sonic chaos. Then in 1964, Dave Davies of the Kinks took a razor blade to the cone of his El Pico amp. The result? The shrieking grit of You Really Got Me. This song topped the charts and made the shrieking, banshee-like breakup of this guitar sound commercially viable. So here's the challenge. How can we recreate this sound authentically, without going full Shreddy Krueger and slashing our gear? There's a hack. Slashing the speaker cone on an otherwise clean amp makes it vibrate unevenly, which creates standing waves and introduces unpredictable harmonic distortion, or clipping, the defining characteristic of fuzzy, overdriven, or distorted audio signals. The main challenge here is that this type of clipping is coming from, literally altering the physical properties of the equipment, not from the preamp section of the amp. We'll need to find a unique workaround. Simply using an overdrive pedal for extra preamp gain won't sound gritty enough. The solution? In software, disable the cab sim entirely. Cabinets essentially act like filters, boosting or attenuating different frequencies that leave the amplifier. Without the virtual cabinet to take the load from the pre and power amp sections, you'll get the raw, unfiltered output produced by the amp. This essentially simulates plugging the guitar directly into a recording console, which produces more or less the same effect. You can hear this on Revolution by the Beatles. This tone continued to appear into the 70s, most notably on songs like 25 or 6-4 by Chicago, although it declined in popularity as smoother high-gain amps and pedals entered the market and became popular. Now, on the other hand, pre-psychedelic era fuzz tones sound very similar to the speaker slashing experiments of the 60s. In 1961, a piece of faulty studio equipment leads session guitarist Grady Martin to produce the first proper recorded fuzz guitar sound during a session with country singer Marty Robbins. Other bands, including The Ventures, found ways to replicate this sound. Crude and generally maligned, this novel effect appeared mostly as a gimmick. This ultimately leads to Gibson releasing the Maestro FC1 fuzz tone in 1962. A revolutionary stompbox fuzz guitar pedal that totally flopped. Yeah, this was the era of the sax solo, and Gibson's marketing team positioned the FC1 as a brass-like transformer, attempting to entice guitarists who were still largely sequestered to rhythm sections while horn players got all the glory. As such, Keith Richards used the FC1 on Satisfaction by the Stones in 1965 as a scratch track placeholder for a horn section that he wanted to record later. However, the rest of the band loved the sound of the scratch track and insisted that it was kept in the final recording, much to his chagrin, which made snarling guitar tones a mainstay in popular music. To dial in this sound, we can use the same bass line from tone number 1, with a Tone Bender style vintage fuzz. For extra bite, try adding a treble booster as well. This sound carries us all the way through to 1966, and can be heard throughout all of the emerging guitar-driven pop of the mid-60s. Jeff Beck with the Yardbirds and the early studio work of Jimmy Page. Then in 1966, everything changes again. arrived at the crossroads in the evolution of guitar tone. Clapton's work on the Beano album with John Mayall in 1966 changes the game entirely. After ceding his seat in the Yardbirds to Jeff Beck due to the band's commercial success, Clapton joined a more authentic and underground project like a true hipster, John Mayall's Bluesbreakers. The Bluesbreakers were kind of like an incubator for all of the British guitar talent of the time, including alumni like Peter Green, who founded Fleetwood Mac, and later Mick Taylor, who would join the Rolling Stones. Clapton purchased a discontinued late 50s Gibson Les Paul and Marshall 212 combo amp for their first recording session, and set about building a sound that would become the bedrock for everything that came next. Now, Clapton insisted on pushing his new Marshall amp to the absolute breaking point. Recording guitar at that volume was unheard of. Defying the risk of clipping or mic bleed, Clapton was unyielding. And the Bluesbreaker sound was born, introducing a new type of overdriven lead guitar tone. Smooth, buttery, warm, replacing the grainy fizz and effervescent bite of its predecessors with powerful bass and gale force mid-range. Now, the Bluesbreaker amp is really a Marshall JTM 45, which you can model in a lot of software. Assuming you don't want to drop thousands of dollars on a hardware unit, you can find a 45 model in the Positive Grid Spark app or in a modeler like Line 6 Helix. Don't be too picky, any vintage style Marshall will do, but avoid models like the 2203 800 or the 900. Those are high-gain Marshall amps that we'll talk about later in the 80s installment of the series. Crank the master volume with middle and treble on 9 and bass on 6. And roll off the guitar's tone knob just a bit for an authentic Clapton sound. Meanwhile, a young R&B session guitarist backing up artists like the Isley Brothers and Little Richard on the Chitlin circuit is going solo. A new London transplant ready to take its burgeoning rock scene by storm, he sets his sights on forging a unique guitar tone that defies imagination. He purchases the Beano album, and blown away by Clapton's powerful guitar sound, more closely examines the images printed on the LP jacket cover. How did he do it? Then he realizes. Examining this image more closely, he sees it. That's how he did it. I need a Marshall. And thus, the legend of Jimi Hendrix begins. We've arrived at our final time-traveling tone spot, and it's unsurprisingly this. By 1967, it's a full-blown guitar revolution. The pure pristine cleans of the early 60s have been washed away in a sea of sonic sin. RU experienced drops, Marshall stacks now tower over every festival stage. Hendrix partners with former RAF engineer Roger Mayer to begin developing custom and modified effects, like the Octavia. Wah pedals become standard issue, and guitarists begin to push every sonic boundary. Nothing is sacred. For classic 60s psych, start with a Marshall Plexi or JMP. I know I have a vintage Plexi right here, but
you know, I mean, we're talking about software, right? Like,
don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that I can afford to pay for this noise complaint. What'd you like better, the sim or the real plexi? Drop a comment and let me know.
A fuzz face is mandatory. Make sure to crank up the fuzz and level knobs, as this is not only going to clip but also push the front end of the amp harder. If you go no further, you've more or less nailed this tone, but it is the sonic revolution of the late 60s, and effects are beginning to come into play. So let's see what we can do. Roger Mayer worked closely with Hendrix to develop the first octafuzz pedal, the Octavia. This is a fuzz pedal that adds an octave above, mixed in with the regular guitar signal. Now, adding a basic octave up from like a pitch shifting pedal won't work. We actually want the circuit in the fuzz pedal to generate that higher overtone. So use an Octavia pedal sim like a Tycho Brahe clone. Finally, let's add a univibe for that unmistakable psychedelic shimmer. Invented in late 60s Japan by Fumio Maeda, the univibe was conceived to mimic the warped, wobbly modulation of Russian shortwave radio broadcasts Maeda heard as a kid in Japan. It's technically a 4-stage optical phaser, but here's the twist. Instead of perfectly symmetrical sweeps back and forth, it uses a light bulb and light sensors to create the modulation. Unpredictable, raw, less precise. All vibe. For the Hendrix swirl, set the speed to between 1 and 3 o'clock with depth high. And make sure to put it after the fuzz phase. From surf rock to psychedelic exploration, the 60s was nothing short of a revolution in guitar tone. And what's wild is most of this was done with really simple gear, used creatively and with ingenuity. Pandora's box has been burst wide open. Guitar tone will never be the same. Which tone was your favorite? Drop a comment and let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the 70s.